everybody. Welcome to La Lista, a Latinx writers podcast. I'm your host, Ruben Mendive. Today we have a brand new writer here via Zoom. And I'd like to ask my guests to introduce themselves for the audience at home. So your name and how you identify.
Ooh, love it. Well, I'm Paloma Martinez, and I identify as a California native, bicultural mix of American and Mexican, Latinx person.
Okay. Where are you from? So what's the short version? What's the long version of you and your family?
Okay. Well, like I mentioned, I'm born and raised in California, a SoCal native, but I have a special place in my heart from NorCal, where my brother lives. And my parents are originally from border towns, Mexicali and Tijuana. I come from a very, very large Mexican-American family. And I say Mexican-American because some were born in Mexico and some were born here in the States. Originally, my grandparents were both born in Texas, but they went back to the motherland and had the majority of their kids there. My mom has 15 siblings and my dad has 9. So when I say big, it's big. I have 200 primos in total. And to be honest, kind of migrating back and forth between Mexico and the United States for the last 2 generations. My mom was born in Mexicali. My dad was born also in Mexicali. But their families were working a lot over here in California and then residing over in Mexico. So it's very much a border town bicultural kind of mezcla of being American and with a huge influence of, also being from Mexico, border town Mexico, which is different from really the rest of it, right? But I was also raised predominantly in Irvine, California. Not a huge, heavy Latinx population here, especially in the late 80s and 90s when I was younger. But, it was actually really cool growing up in Irvine in particular, because it's kind of this unique pocket of multicultural communities. There's a lot of first gens from different parts of the world, lots of immigrants in this rare pocket of Orange County. But yeah, so that's, I've spent most of my life here in California. I went to undergrad in San Diego, grad school in LA, and have family mostly in San Diego and Orange County. Yeah.
And, I am curious about people growing up. How would you describe your household growing up?
It was kind of unique. So I actually grew up on the UCI campus in graduate housing. My dad was going to school there in my, he was a forever student a little bit. So it was my first 5 years of growing up. So it was actually really unique because I was on campus with a bunch of other older students who had kids, and it was pretty diverse, pretty international as well. And then I spent a lot of my time in sort of what we would call the barrios of San Diego, where a lot of my family lived. So it was kind of this foot in one world, which is living on campus, it's its own thing outside of any community. And then going and running around with all my primos in the streets, in Vista, California. And for the most part, there was, in my particular house, we were a family. I have a younger brother, my mom and dad. My dad was in school. My mom's a teacher. But we also took in a lot of my cousins. So it was this kind of 2-bedroom apartment packed with a lot of rural energy of kids. We were always the home that all our friends came to. We had this awesome swing set that my dad built, and kind of this ragtag playhouse that he made from leftovers from probably the garbage can, I don't even know, found. And so it was kind of this this place where all the kids came, and there was always some kind of frozen microwave thing that we could throw in. And to be honest, culturally though speaking, I would say there's a little bit of erasure culturally in my house. My brother and I refused to speak Spanish, even though my mom was a bilingual teacher. So we spoke English in the home. My dad's side of the family, I barely could, kind of interact with because of that, which was really, if I look back, kind of a bummer, because they predominantly spoke Spanish, despite the fact that they lived here in the States. But on my mom's side, it was a lot more fluid, a lot more bilingual, a lot more Spanglish. So my house kind of felt a little bit more of this really kind of met like a mix of cultures. And it ranged from us having international students from China over, or like my parents' friends who might have been like Persian. So we'd have like, you know, traditions of what it was to be Mexican, but also a lot of different things. So that's what I felt, kind of like this kind of unique little space where I grew up.
You know, I'm always curious about people during like the high school years. So like 14 to 18, I always frame it in the sense of like, who were you? Who were you pretending to be? And how did other people see you?
Oof, man. I think I was pretending to be a lot of things in high school. I felt pretty lost in high school, but no one saw that. I was popular, well liked. I was athletic. I was on student government. I had lots of friends. I was I was a cool kid. But I never really felt like I fit in. I always felt a little bit alone all the time, and I don't know why. Maybe I do now, but I just kind of felt out of my element. I was a latchkey kid at that time. My parents had gotten divorced by that time, and my dad had pretty much picked up and started a new family. And my mom was a single mom working her butt off, commuting from LA back to Orange County. So my brother and I were just kind of, a lot of the time in charge of our own little lives, despite my mom being a wonderful mother. So I think there was just kind of like a clumsiness of trying to, to fit in where people thought I should be. Sometimes I felt more comfortable being with like, the nerdy conservative kids who didn't like to party, but I would never like express that fully to my friends. And I never felt like they would fully accept me because I was part of like the party popular kids, and I think I did love school. So I love learning. There's some subjects I like better than others. And then of course I hadn't really come into understanding my queer identity. I think it didn't really blossom for me until college. So, and it was interesting because in high school, there's this period of time where my girlfriends thought it would be really fun to explore bisexuality and making out with each other and of course trying to impress the boys or whatever. And I just didn't even connect with that. Like for me, I was like, you guys are my friends. That is so weird. Why are we going to kiss if we don't romantically like each other? I didn't understand it. So I think there was like a little bit of that displacement. I also didn't have any Latinx friends. Not really. My best friends were Persian, Indian, and white. So I think there was just a little bit of outsiderness, maybe that played in, that it wasn't as apparent to me. And I think I think my parents' divorce kind of lingered, to be honest. And so I didn't know how to be my true authentic self. And I wish I would have at the time in retrospect, but I think that's part of our journey, right? Trying to figure out who we are. I'm still figuring out.
So what did you do after high school? Like, did you have a plan? Like, did things go according to plan?
Well, for me, education was always something that I loved and that my parents really pressed upon my brother and I. So of course the plan was to go to college. And I ended up applying. I didn't get into all the schools I wanted to. I really wanted to go to UCLA. I still do. I've always been rejected. One day it'll happen. But I ended up deciding to go either between Berkeley or UCSD. And honestly, I'm not a huge person to actually have regrets. I think things happen for a reason, but I do regret not going to Berkeley. And I didn't go because my mom was a single mom, my brother was still in high school, and I didn't want to be too far away. So I decided to go to UCSD. And I think it actually really changed the course of my life. I thought I was probably going to be an attorney, maybe a politician, maybe an activist, or I don't know, maybe a scientist, just because of the way that my grades were and how academic I was. And so when I figured out at UCSD through my electives that I could actually get a degree in visual arts, storytelling, filmmaking, TV and film and stuff, it changed my plan. And I decided I can actually make an impact. That's what I always wanted to do. I wanted to make an impact in the world somehow. And I realized through this communication and culture class I took that, you know, content shapes culture. And that really solidified me wanting to figure out how to do that. But because none of my family was involved in the industry, you know, I feel like they still think I'm a videographer for weddings, maybe. I didn't know what to do. So academics, again, was like the only way I understood. So I actually took like a quarter abroad and went to UCLA, which the only time they've let me in. And I took the film and TV courses there. And that basically led to me getting on track for that career.
How did you even know that storytelling, like filmmaking, was something that you wanted to pursue? Like, what clicked for you? Did you see evidence of it beforehand that sort of led you to that?
Yeah, since I was very young, I always had a love for stories. For two reasons. I was a book nerd, so I loved consuming literature. And then my family were storytellers. When we'd get together, you know, there'd be like at least 20 to 30 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, and they'd be reminiscing about their childhoods in Tijuana, Mexicali, or here in California. And I think for me, I just loved this notion of, you know, retelling our past in order to inform our current or future, you know. So I relished in that. And I think it clicked in high school for me. When I was a freshman, I somehow convinced our English teacher to let us do a short film instead of a final essay. I don't know how that happened. But I ended up writing and directing my first short as a freshman in high school. And it was a retelling of Scream with gender swapping, with like the best, I don't even know how my teachers like allowed this to happen, but like with a Rage Against the Machine soundtrack. Like, what? How did I get away with that? And then I just started filming like documentary style my life with my friends. So at parties, at different things, my friend Sharon and I were making music videos because we liked punk and you know, Sublime, and it kind of just was like, oh, I can do this. But now actually that I'm talking to you and I think about it, my dad always had a video camera on him growing up. Also, like, it just clicked. And he's also a writer. So I think that it took a while to stumble and figure out how to do it. And like I mentioned, education was like the thing. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go to school for it. I'm going to learn about it at UCLA. I'm going to come back. I'm going to change my major. I'm going to apply to grad school. I'm going to get rejected, which I did. And then and then I started my own little video production company because I thought that's what it was. And now I know it's not what I want. I don't want to make corporate videos. And then I got into USC. And I think that's where it solidified how to make this into a career.
I am curious about like growing up in Orange County, like having like, and also like being in San Diego, like they're like more conservative than LA for sure. So I'm just saying, what was the culture like while you were there and like in those places, and like how was it something that you like was like something that was even identifiable to you?
You know, there's one thing that's really unique about my mom's side of the family, who I'm closer with and who live in San Diego. We're not Catholic. So my family is Seventh-day Adventist, which I don't know if people know, but it is like a pretty conservative Christian-based religion that worships on Saturday and follows some of the customs of Judaism in terms of like culture-wise. And we were pretty hardcore growing up. I grew up in that faith. I left the church when I was around 12, when my parents got divorced. So that was like a big influence in terms of like how my family operated within the confines, because they were also separate from the traditional Mexican community, as like we didn't have like, I had one prima that had a quinceañera. There was no baptisms. Like, you know, none of my family drank except the primos later. But like none of my aunts and uncles drink alcohol. So there was like, it was its own kind of pocket culture. But, you know, in terms of growing up in a very, especially during the time where I was in the 90s, very conservative place. Like I mentioned, Irvine is a little bit of a different spot within Orange County. So during the pandemic, my wife and I have been living down in South Orange County with my parents just to get out of LA. And it is now very apparent to me, especially in this election year, how different it was. And I don't really feel like I felt it growing up, in terms of it being, what I felt more is like I think income levels. So all of my friends lived in really awesome, amazing homes in the hills, who got BMWs when they turned 16 and who had beach houses and boats. And I kind of lived a rich life vicariously through them because I was living in an apartment and my mom was doing her best, but my mom also came from very humble beginnings. So I felt more of like a class system in terms of like the income. And I will tell you a little quick thing though, when I did feel it in high school, it was shocking because it felt like it came out of nowhere. I was on a lunch date with this boy that I had a huge crush on. I will not say his name just because. Anywho, so he and I we're going out and I was thrilled, like huge crush. And we were driving up the street. So I went to high school basically down the street from UCI. So that area was filled with international students, a bunch of people. It was a kind of a unique area. Anywho, we were driving up, we pulled a stoplight. There's some gardeners on the corner. This guy leans out and yells, "Dirty Mexicans," out of the car at them. I was like, what the hell, dude? He's like, "What, man? Don't you like hate when they like whistle at you? It's so like rude." I'm like, "Don't you know I'm Mexican?" Literally. And he looked at me, he said, "You're not Mexican, you're Hawaiian." I was like, "My name is Paloma Martinez, my friend. What are you talking about?" And I was like, I want to get out. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, take me back to school. This is bullshit. And he was like, "Well, you're just not like those Mexicans then." So I think there was a lot of that. There was a lot of like, you're different from the Mexicans because, Santa Ana, which is where my mom taught elementary school and bilingual education, is, obviously like a huge community of immigrants and Latinos and Latinx, And so I think there was always this, like, that's where you would belong if you were that type of Mexican, but because you're here, you're different. And that was shocking. And I think from that point, that was like sophomore year of high school, I made it very clear to be super proud of where I came from. And I made it a huge point whenever I was at my rich friends' houses to talk to their housekeepers and their house cleaners and their gardeners in Spanish, where before I didn't do it, in order to be like, "Hey, I see you and you see me, and like, I know you're there."
Yeah, no, it's like wild because again, it's like identity is like how you see yourself, but it's also like how others see you. And then when you're sort of confronted with that, it's like, what you sort of have to look inwards and be like, wait, what am I putting off? And like, I got to make sure that whatever they think I am not that. Like, and it's like twofold because it's like, oh, like they're like me and this is how you're treating them. And then also like, what am I doing to feel like it's something I did too? Like, is this my fault? And like, let me go out of my way to like, even within us to be like, no, we're the same. Like,
yeah. And there was a separation because they also sometimes, the women who were living in these homes almost full-time working would look at me like, "You don't get it either." I come from a family of house cleaners. My family works in, my grandma and my tias were house cleaners their whole lives. And there's respect and admiration in that. And, for me, I was like, I never want to walk into this house and for them to think I don't respect them or I don't understand or connect with them. That was always the thing that I had to do and adamantly do after that point in time. And I guess it did make me think, what was I doing before for people not to identify me with this community that is so sacred to me? I don't know, and it's still a work in progress. Like, when I went to go work at a Mexican-based company here and that was set up here in LA, I mean, one of the first things they called me was pocha, and I didn't even know what that meant.
Same.
Till that point, I was like, "What? Huh?" And for the most part, it was a beautiful experience, like really kind of connecting hardcore with my Mexican roots. But there was also so much outsiderness, being the only American in the company, essentially, and having to learn what it means to be Mexican in Mexico City, or Guadalajara or somewhere else that's not a border town. And that was a big learning curve for me too. But all these things, despite it being, probably challenging in the moment, just had made me have a deeper appreciation for the variety that our community offers, you know, and the different experiences that we have and the different places we come from.
Yeah, so I am curious about your time at USC. What do you think? What was it like? What do you feel like you took away from that time?
Well, besides a big student loan debt, I'm not playing. It's true. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
You know, I think USC was a place for me to be able to fully focus on the craft of storytelling and filmmaking. Otherwise, I was like side hustling all these jobs to pay my bills. And so the fact that I was able to take student loans out for 3 years and just be in the zone of craft was super helpful. I think, you know, being in your mid-20s and being able to just focus all your attention on storytelling is such a gift. Not everyone has that. Some people don't want to take student loans out or didn't even realize it and had to work to help support their family, whatever. I had the luxury to be able to do that. I think it's a privilege, to be honest, despite my student loan debt that I took on. So it was cool. It was like a lot of figure it out yourself a little bit. I will say it wasn't always smooth. I was one of 5 women in my class. I was the only, I think, Latinx student in my class. I think someone maybe was half, but didn't really identify. We had some international students from Latin America, but you know, to be the only one, really almost in a big class and multiple classes was really interesting. So there was a little bit of skew where it wasn't, the stories I wanted to tell weren't always supported. The places I wanted to tell them weren't always supported. But I think at the time, USC, at least what it did offer was a like full scope of what it means to be a storyteller. You know, you had to learn all the different crafts. Like you had to do sound, even though I would never even try to do sound because they're geniuses and it's not my thing. But you know, we had to. They made us partner up with other students that, you know, maybe we would never hang out with on our own, but we had to build a project together, which was really cool. And then getting just to get a sense of how other people's approach and process to it was really awesome. One of my favorite things was actually teaching the undergrads. I loved being a teacher's assistant. I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to get my MFA was I would love to teach one day. And so seeing the students that I was working with develop their stuff and, you know, kind of their eyes light up when something clicked or something worked, and then being able to face the challenges was really a very cool part of it. And to be honest, there is such a thing as a Trojan Mafia, and I'm a part of it now. And it's been super helpful, especially with my peers. You know, like I love seeing my peers blossom and grow into these like badass filmmakers and storytellers and television writers nowadays. So it's been cool now that we've been out of school for a certain amount of years to see everyone grow.
And so what'd you get up to after USC?
So in the last year I was at USC, I was doing a thesis. I was filming it in LA and in Tijuana. And I got this opportunity via Facebook by all means from a friend who was like, Diego Luna needs a PA for some like test shots in Santa Monica. And, you know, when you're in your thesis film as a master's student at USC, you're not PAing really anymore. But I was like, okay, Diego Luna was a huge fan of the films he was in. Yes, sign me up. I don't care how tired I am. So that actually led to me being hired a couple weeks later as Diego's assistant. And I was still in my last year at USC doing my thesis and working for Diego, which was gnarly. And not only that, I will share this with the world. I kind of lied my way into the job because they asked me if I was fluent in Spanish. And at the time, I was more like a 9th grade level, maybe conversational speaker. But of course, I said, yeah, of course I'm fluent. Hello. And they went with it. And Diego, very, very lovely about it. I think he knew 5 minutes into the interview that we were not going to be speaking in Spanish to each other. So our work relationship was he would speak in Spanish and I would speak in English. And Google Translate was a huge help for me with emails in my first 6 months. But, you know, like they say, if you're immersed in it, it comes out. And so it actually really, really helped my Spanish. And I think I'm almost a fluent speaker now. Yeah, so I did that, and I was with Diego at CHINGONA. Also, I was working specifically with Diego, but also kind of tapped my toe into helping the other executives that were there because we were a very small team. And I did that for 5 years, and I went from being Diego's executive assistant to like a CE role, and then to his development executive. And that was the last executive position I held.
Yeah. And so can we talk a little bit about that time? I sort of mentioned it, like being in Mexico, having to like what is it like to because you did talk that like border Mexico is a little different than the rest of it. So like, can you just talk about that experience? Because to a lot of people, it's like a dream, it's like living in Mexico, working with like Diego Luna. Like, what was that like for you to do that?
I think it was kind of a dream for me. And the fact that it came true was awesome. It was like a Mexican boot camp, in getting more connected to my Latinidad, which was amazing. And there are so many perks of working with an A-list talent just generally, and so like in my first week, there was like so many like mind-blowing moments. In my first week, we screened a cut of Chavez. And Diego didn't really like prep me. He's like, I want you to come screen it, take notes. I want your feedback, Obviously, I was the only American, essentially, but there's other people in the room, but in terms of the team. And so to get an American Latino's perspective was important. And I get there, and they have me sitting next to Paul Chavez, Cesar's son. Okay? Like, mind blown. Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta were my, like, heroes. Since I was very young, my grandparents worked the fields. My mom spent much of her youth in the fields of California. She had Cesar come speak to her when she was at university. So I literally was like it still makes me choke up because it was like the things I believed in and the places I wanted to be are coming true. It's nuts. So there was like all those moments, and being able to work on Chavez was probably like one of the greatest gifts. I literally have this moment where I'm on the dance floor with Dolores Huerta at the premiere. She's like one of the last people on the dance floor holding a tequila. And I'm just like, we're just like having a blast. Like, I'm literally with one of the most impressive, important activists in our community. And we're just dancing, drinking tequila. Like, how is this real? So there was a lot of those moments. There was also a lot of like catch up, in terms of like a little bit of imposter syndrome, where when I was in Mexico City, it took a while for me to really like want to like speak up, because it was like my broken Spanish or wasn't as, clear as everyone else's, or to fit in. But eventually I found my friends there, and, the CHINGONA community really is amazing. It's a bunch of artists, and I got to make some really cool friends and do some really cool things. One of the special things that Diego and I were able to do was that we co-wrote a short for Sundance that I produced and he directed alongside CHINGONA. And that was really, really cool. We used local talent, and we were on location in Mexico City. And I just loved being able to have that opportunity, But I will say too, that it also made me recognize the differences between trying to tell stories about our community here in the States and to tell stories about, Latinos in Latin America. I think there's a distinct difference between being an immigrant and then not, or being a potentially passing white Mexican in Mexico, and being maybe a more indigenous Mexican here in the United States. There's so many layers, that I never knew about before, and was important for me to understand in order, I think, to best tell the stories that I wanted to tell.
This sounds like a dream job. So like, what was your motivation to be like, okay, it's time to move on?
Well, the universe kind of pushed it on me a bit more than I think I was ready for, or I was ready for it and I didn't know. I think everything here, especially in this industry, can run its course, especially when you want to be a creative. As an executive, I was there to help uplift someone else's vision, other people's stories. And I think I always wanted to tell my stories. And while, the company was really supportive in hearing my voice and taking my input, I'm not really sure if being a writer was ever going to be possible with being a full-time executive, you know, and trying to build something with Diego, you know, him, especially for him as a director. So I think that was something that I knew in my heart, but I didn't have the guts to pull the trigger on, because when you're in that position, when you're in this dream job with one of the most prolific Mexican actors, you know, who has gravitas in the industry and who you've been working with for 5 years and don't have any other experience, like, it's hard to say goodbye to that. But actually something happened too. So basically Diego and I made a decision to go in different directions ultimately. But the same day that happened, I actually was diagnosed with breast cancer. So that was for me kind of like, either way, I think I would have, if I had gotten that diagnosis or not, would have had to made some changes in my life and probably in my career. So that's why I mentioned, like, the universe was like, yo, we're going to shake things up for you right now. So it was all a blessing in disguise. It didn't feel like a blessing at first. And now I'm like, oh, this was the right thing to happen. Because, you know, when life throws that curveball at you and death is like closer than it's ever been, you can, well, for me, I decided that to really lean into, what do I want to get out of this life? And what kind of impression do I want to leave on it? And for me, that was being a writer and cultivating stories that I really believed in and that I loved and that I felt were important to tell. And so that solidified my decision to step away from the executive world and to pursue a more creative path.
You leave this job that a lot of people would kill for. Again, a dream job for somebody that wants to have that dream and be an executive and do it. So, like, what were those years of, like, okay, walking away from this, now I'm going to set my own course, and, like, so what did you get up to?
Well, the first thing I did was get through cancer. And, you know, I feel really grateful, because for me, it was a journey that isn't always the same for everyone else. I caught the cancer, we caught it early. I had covered California healthcare. So, like, I actually, even though I was paying my own insurance, at least I had it. That saved my life. I don't even know what would have happened if I didn't have insurance. That it was a lot of, like, that journey of going through treatment, you know, and then recovery. But the only thing I really had the energy to do is write and develop ideas at that time. Of course, it made me really confront these, like, maybe demons that I had and trauma that I had previously, because for me, getting cancer meant I don't want to do anything that stresses me out anymore. The less stress, the better, because my diagnosis had nothing to do with genetics. It was all, doctors still don't know. It was all environmental stress. I don't know, you know, like, they still don't know. And so for me, I was like, I want to live the healthiest life I can physically in order to be able to participate in it, you know? So there was, like, a big holistic transition for me. And it dealt with also, it impacted my career decisions. Right. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to get back into this industry now that I've recovered and I, you know, have my strength back, et cetera, and I'm cancer free, what is that going to look like? And so for me, it was making sure I'm doing projects that I really believe in, supporting talent that I want to uplift. So this was, you know, women of color, queer creatives, you know, basically BIPOCs, like, you know, so that was a thing for me, and that's what I was looking for. So it kind of, you know, in a way, it funnels out a lot of other jobs that you could have. And so I ended up doing a couple shorts with an upcoming writer-director, which was a great way to flex my muscle back into the business, because it wasn't too much, because I was still adjusting after my radiation treatment. Like, my energy levels were 50% and then 70 and then 90, you know, now they're 100 again. So I had to pace myself, which is a weird thing to say, especially I'm historically a workaholic and an overachiever. I didn't know what it meant to slow down. What does that even mean? So when you're forced to slow down, you have to become particular and precise of what you're giving your energy to, right? And so another thing that popped up afterward, when I was just sort of like, how am I going to make money when I was producing? That's for me, like, the way that I could bring some money in. And luckily, I really enjoy it as well. While development in indie features does not pay the bills, online content does. And I was lucky enough to have been working with a friend of mine named Asher, who owns Pollution Studios in LA. And he reached out to me for this awesome project that basically carried me through 2018 into 2019. And it was to produce and co-write a documentary series with a 12-year-old vegan activist named Genesis Butler. And it was awesome. We went around the world. We were in Europe, we were in Puerto Rico, we were in New York, we were here in California, just with her and her mom talking about how veganism can impact the environment, our health, you know, and all the complexities in between. So that was awesome. It won 2 Tellys for social impact online content. And it was cool. I was my own boss. I got to work with Asher, who's one of my, you know, besties in the industry. We got to go around the world, and I got paid to do that. And I was like, this is awesome. But throughout the whole time, I was still writing, decided to try a pilot out. I had a feature film over at Mandalay Pictures this whole time. It lost traction when I got diagnosed and got off course. But then I ended up writing in 2018, the pilot that made the Latinx TV List. And so I was just, you know, really trying to figure out how to stay creative and have a healthy, well-balanced life, which I'm still trying to do. That is now my full motto. And then it can be difficult because you have to make some sacrifices in order to have that balance. But that's where I am now, you know, just kind of making sure I lean into what makes me feel good, what makes me happy, what do I love? And surprisingly, it's working out.
And yeah, so you mentioned the Latinx TV List. So can you sort of explain what that is and what your experience has been so far?
Yeah, sure. So the Latinx TV List was awesome. It's this inaugural list that was curated by an excellent group of Latinx content creators like Tanya Saracho, the La Lista, the Untitled Latinx Writers Project. Sorry, I'm getting them all mixed up. And I should know this by now because I've been doing a lot of stuff with them. But so basically in collaboration with the Blacklist, right? And with Hulu and Remezcla and Nalip. So it was like basically this awesome crew of people who were like, hey, like how can we recognize, you know, what we think are the strongest pilots out there from Latinx writers? So of course it was a competition submission sort of scenario. I have probably submitted to every competition lab and submission under the sun. But when this one came up in particular, I was like, hell yeah, this is the one. If any of them, like, please, this is the one, right? So I actually was like rushing at the deadline to like get this done. And my wife saw a text from my friend Lindsay, who is part of the Untitled Latinx thing. And so that's sort of a social media kind of thing. And it was nuts, my submission. So the submission was like initially in March. Okay. Like literally the day of the lockdown that happened in San Francisco. Okay. So I was in NorCal because my brother's wife was due and I wanted to see my little nephew born. So my mom and I were up there. But all of a sudden, well, first of all, baby decided to stay inside and he was late. So he didn't come out. But we were there for almost a week. And my wife and my stepdad were like, dude, there's a pandemic. They're shutting down San Francisco. You guys got to get home. I was like, my mom in abuela mode was like, I'm not going anywhere. So we stayed as long as we could. It didn't work out. He was like a week late anyway. So we're driving back down. My mom's driving my car. I am grammar checking, typing because there's this deadline and it's that night that we're traveling down. I get home. I see a text from my wife being like, they extended the deadline. I was like, what? For a month. They extended the deadline a month, which was the best thing ever because the pilot I was going to submit was a new idea, a first draft, totally the wrong move. So instead, I was like, you know what? I'm going to like just tweak and revise this other draft of the Edge El Borde, which I ended up submitting. That was actually the one that got chosen. So, of course, we had to wait months. I mean, we submitted in April, and then we found out in June or July, I think. And it was so funny because I didn't hear anything. You just submit, you don't hear anything. And then out of the blue, and I didn't forget, but I was like, I never like to force anything. So I don't like focusing too much on what, I'm just like, let it happen, whatever, we'll see what happens. And you get this email out of nowhere and it's like, congratulations. I'm like, that what? I was literally like shocked. Like my wife and I were driving down PCH to go get like acai bowls or something so basic. And I was like crying. I literally was just like, finally, oh my God. So it was like this like release of like, I've been hustling as a writer to a certain degree for like 10 years, just trying and rejection. So to get on this was just like the best thing that could ever happen in 2020 for me. And of course there was like this like really cool announcement and people were like, oh, this is awesome, left and right. And the best thing for me that came out of the whole thing was actually getting representation. So I am represented by two awesome managers, Corinne and Arabella at Artists First. And they were one of the first to reach out to me, to want to connect. And I kind of actually knew they were the ones, like right when I talked to them, you just have this feeling. But I went through and met with other, reps and went through the whole process. But as soon as I said yes, they have been keeping me busy nonstop with amazing projects that I feel are really up my alley and things that I get really passionate about. So it's been an incredible experience to have that recognition. And, I know also that there was a thing where Hulu offered 2 blind deals to two of the 10 that were named, right? And it was actually cool. When we were all named, we all got in a Zoom and we all connected and chatted. And it was such a wonderful thing to see all these different writers represented on this list, and all the pilots were so different. It was really, really cool. And some really cool stuff happened. Like Tanya Saracho reached out and I got to do like a one-on-one with her, and I'm such a huge fan. And, it led to a lot of openings that I had been wanting for a very long time, and gave me the confidence to solidify myself and call myself a writer professionally for the first time. I was always like, I'm a writer, producer, I'm a writer, director. And now I'm like, I'm a professional writer. And it feels really good to say that. And, having that support team, I should have been able to say it before, because you don't need all that. We're writers. We really are. If you write, you're a writer. I don't care what you've achieved and what you haven't achieved. You know what I mean? Like if you're hustling on that page, if you're putting your finger to that keyboard, you're a writer, period. The announcement just came out, for they picked 3, which is awesome. I wasn't one of them, but that's okay. The 3 that they picked are so super creators and super talented, and kind of speaks still to like how we need to keep uplifting our community and our writers and our talent, because Hulu was always going to give, I think, the writers that had already proven themselves a bit to do that. I never knew, and maybe this is going to be controversial, but I don't know if I had high expectations for them to choose me, even though I don't have anything professionally paid for and written yet. So the 3 that they did choose, I'm such big fans of. I really love that they have a nice foothold in the industry, and that they're just going to continue elevating. And I'm sure they'll bring us along with them, and it's going to open so many more doors, for the rest of us, I hope. So I was thrilled they picked 3. Like, I was just like, I was telling someone, I think Dominic, who was one of the selected ones, I was like, can they just pick all of us? Can they just hook us all up? Like, we're going to kick butt. We'll see what happens. So I'm just happy to be part of the inaugural list, and I want to support more lists like that. And I hopefully, I can help the next batch of writers get these opportunities. Because I think even the writers who got chosen who weren't repped, I think all of us got repped after that. And that's huge. Like, I will take that. I have absolutely just gratitude for being a part of that, and for the people who put it together.
Yeah. No, I remember when they announced it, I saw your name and I was like, I triple checked. I was like, wait a minute, is this? And I was like, okay, good for her. Like, this is amazing news. Because I think we all feel that in a sense. It's like, God, I just need a break. When is this? I'll take anything, whatever it is. And then when it comes in, it's like, and it's also been amazing to see like it's just like even that small of an announcement, like even prying the door open like a little like crack, just lets all this stuff flow in, like representation. Everyone got like to be interviewed and like video interviews on Hulu's YouTube channel, and like really promoting and like highlighting all your voices. And it's like more than you could ask for. And it's like, and that's why I'm like, I was happy to see your name, because I'm like, great, like this is just going to snowball and snowball and snowball, and it's well deserved.
Thank you. And it has snowballed. It's amazing how, I think I spoke to this, maybe the LA Times interview, where it was like, they were like, well, what was the first word, or how did it feel? I was like, I felt like, recognition, because we have been here. We are working our butts off, and we've been here for a long time. And, there was always excuses that we weren't. And so to the industry, and I get it, they need someone to vet you. They need someone to recognize you before they take a chance on you. This is a business. Like, let's be honest, it really is. And so for those things to happen, it takes community. It takes the artists, it takes the executives to say, hey, no, like, we're going to stand behind, these like newbie writers. We're going to do the work to vet them, so you feel more comfortable, and you feel like, you're not it's not so risky, but it's more exciting, And I just think we need more and more of those opportunities. Like, the more, the better. It's going to be a snowball effect, and you're seeing it. Like, I love, like, the Blacklist is a really great incubator for doing that. They partner up with all these different communities to open the doors up, with Indigenous communities, with, just different things. Is awesome. We need more of that.
I am always curious about my guests and their writing. Just like, what are some of the stories that you're attracted to? What are the themes that you see coming up? Like what is the stuff that you feel like is always at the core of your writing? Well,
I tend to do a couple things in terms of my process. I pull a lot of ideas out from real stories that, pop up in the news or journals or podcasts or whatever. So I have these kind of visceral reactions to some stories, and then I take those in and I say, well, what is the story? What can this story teach us? How can this story help impact culture? And then I build off that kernel and then try to dramatize it somehow. And I'm inclined lately to genre, sci-fi in particular. I'm getting curious about fantasy. I have this there's this queer sci-fi fantasy database online that has all the novels from new writers that delve into queer fantasy and sci-fi. And I'm always digging around there to see if there's anything cool to adapt or different ideas. But I will say that, a big influence of mine as a writer would be Spielberg. Obviously, growing up with his films, I love the idea of looking at ordinary people and putting them in extraordinary circumstances. I love grounding things, but then elevating them. I love the idea also of journeying into places we've been before, but pulling new stories out from them. And I say that because, I like world building, but I don't need to create a whole different world or a niche world to talk about my communities that I'm a part of or that I want to talk about, because we've been here. We've always been here the whole time. And that's why it's like a rediscovery of where we've been with new voices and new perspectives. So I'm pretty genre agnostic. I just like character-driven stories that talk about, the human experience and generally are motivating and uplifting.
I'm always curious about the writers that my guests are inspired by. So these could be heroes, peers, people you creep on Instagram who don't know who you are, but you love the work they're doing. So who are some of those people for you?
Some of the writers out there that really have had an impact and inspired me. I mean, I'll mention again, Tanya Saracho is like, Vida for me was just like, yes, thank you. So a huge fan of what she's doing. I love that she has a playwriting background and that she's, made her way into television, and she's a badass showrunner and just a creator overall. My homegirl, Lindsay Villarreal, like a huge fan of too, in the space that she's carved herself out for in TV and her feature writing. And I have this dream of being able to adapt something by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. She did Mexican Gothic, Untamed Shore, and whatnot. And I think, for me, I'm still kind of like on the lookout. I have 2 books that I'm reading. One is an anthology called Latinx Rising. It's short stories by sci-fi writers. And then I have another one that's called Walk in the Clouds. It's indigenous sci-fi shorts. So I'm always on the lookout for like different, talent with unique voices. I'm also a huge fan of all the writers on the Latinx TV list. I'm excited to see what they do. Especially, basically everyone, their stories were so unique. And I think, I'm just so thrilled to see this wave of talent come through. So I'm always keeping my eye out. And I actually went off social media for like mental health lately. So I'm doing a lot less creeping, but I'm still doing a lot more reading.
That's great. Yeah, we should all be doing that. I would love to just read instead of be scrolling on Instagram,
It's changed my life. Like the fact that it was like you detox first and you're like, what do I do? I'm like, oh my God, I'm reading 3 novels at one time. It's awesome. So
jealous. Okay. And so where can people find you? What are your social media handles?
Well, now that I'm social media free, I'm at Paloma Pics on Insta. I will creep up there once in a while. I'm Media Dove on Twitter. And that's it, basically. I do a lot of retweeting, especially I only pop on Twitter during yesterday I was doing text banking while I was watching the debate, and I was tweeting. There's a lot of retweets, a lot of from Lindsay. Lindsay's a great on Twitter. I'm just like always just retweeting what she does. So.
She is, and she's very low key about it. She's only occasionally on, but I'm like, oh, this is fire.
Exactly.
So I like to ask my guests to help title the episode. So the prompt is a blank Latinx writer. You can put more than one word in that blank. You can mix them all around. Just whatever feels true to you, your writing, this conversation. I also use it as a recruitment tool so that when people see the title, they can be like, oh, that's like me. Like, let me listen to this. There's someone else that's like me that I feel so alone. Thank God. Let me build community with this person.
A queer chingona who writes from the heart.
Perfect.
Okay.
Love it. I don't think we've had that yet. So yeah.
Great.
And with that, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was so great that you've been on my list to interview, so that when I saw you on the Latinx list, I was like, it's time. Like, this is a good moment to catch her.
Well, thank you. I've honestly been such a fan, and I so appreciate that you have this. It's so important, and it's giving so many writers the opportunity to share their story, and it's amazing, and I feel really honored to be a part of it. And
I really did want you on it. I remember the first time I met you, you were like, oh, hey. And I was like, oh, I've looked you up. You're a badass. So when I
love that mixer. I just was like, I have no idea what am I getting myself into here, but I'm showing up. And it was awesome. You had great people there. And, I love that you're still doing it through the pandemic. It's actually more important than ever, like I said, I really am honored. To be interviewed about your writing it just makes you feel seen. Yeah. So thanks for helping me feel seen.
No, of course. And thank you so much to our listeners. You can catch us next week with a brand new writer. Follow us at La Lista Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. And we'll be back next week. Bye.
Ciao.